It was a warm summer evening in 1863 when the rolling hills of Pennsylvania seemed almost too peaceful to be hiding a storm. The sun was dipping low, casting long amber shadows across the fields, the kind of scene that would make a painter pause to capture it. But just beyond those golden pastures, tens of thousands of soldiers, men barely out of their youth, were marching, sweating, and bracing themselves for what they knew was coming. The Battle of Gettysburg was about to erupt, and with it, a strange and enduring mystery would be born. To understand it, you have to step into that moment. Imagine the crack of rifle fire echoing across the valleys, the acrid bite of black powder smoke burning your lungs, and the chaotic roar of commands shouted through the din of battle. This was war at its most brutal. For 3 long days, the Union and Confederate armies clashed in a desperate struggle that would decide not just the fate of a battle, but perhaps the future of a nation. In the middle of it all, somewhere between the thunder of artillery and the cries of the wounded, something, or someone, vanished. Not a piece of equipment, not a flag or a cannon, but a man. A man whose disappearance would puzzle historians for generations. Some claim he deserted under the cover of chaos. Others insist he met a darker fate, one far stranger than the simple tragedies of war. His name was Amos Carter, a Union private from Vermont. By all accounts, he was a loyal soldier, the kind who carried his kit without complaint and always followed orders. He wasn't famous, wasn't an officer, and had no particular mark on history, until the day he walked into the smoke and never walked out again. Witnesses swore they saw him at dawn on the second day of fighting, musket in hand, standing shoulder to shoulder with his comrades near the wheat field. Then, during a brief lull, he was sent to deliver a message to another regiment just a few hundred yards away. The terrain should have been easy to cross, a gentle slope dotted with low stone walls and the occasional stand of trees. Yet when the fighting resumed an hour later, Carter was nowhere to be found. No one saw him fall. No one found his body. It was as if the earth had swallowed him whole. At first, his disappearance was dismissed as one of the countless uncertainties of battle. Men were killed, wounded, or separated from their units every hour. The chaos made it impossible to track everyone. But after the battle, when the grim work of gathering the dead began, searchers scoured the area where Carter had last been seen. They found weapons, uniforms, and personal effects scattered among the fallen, but no sign of Private Amos Carter. And that's where the story should have ended, a simple missing soldier lost to history. Except, rumors began to spread among the survivors. Some claimed that in the heavy morning fog of July 3rd, just before Pickett's charge, a lone Union soldier was seen standing in the middle of the field, not moving, not reacting to the artillery exploding around him. Others swore they heard someone calling for help in a voice that seemed to echo strangely, as though coming from a long tunnel beneath the ground. When word of these stories reached Carter's commanding officer, a small search party was sent back into the field. They followed the accounts to a low rise near the Devil's Den, a place already steeped in eerie legends and whispered superstitions among the troops. There, in a patch of trampled grass, they found something unusual: Carter's rifle, propped neatly against a boulder with his bayonet fixed. Next to it lay his cartridge box, fully loaded. But of the man himself there was no sign. What makes this so baffling is that soldiers in combat almost never abandoned their weapons voluntarily. A rifle was not just a tool, it was your lifeline. To leave it behind meant something had gone terribly wrong, something sudden and unexpected. Some believed Carter had been struck by a cannon blast so powerful it obliterated his body, but there were no scorch marks, no fragments, no disturbed soil that would suggest such an impact. Others whispered darker theories, that he had stumbled into one of the limestone caves rumored to snake beneath Gettysburg and become trapped in the darkness, his cries muffled by the earth. Yet no cave entrance was ever found near the site. The most unsettling accounts came from 2 soldiers in Carter's regiment who swore that just minutes before the fighting resumed, they saw him standing still, staring toward the tree line as though listening to something. One of them shouted his name, but Carter didn't respond. He just stepped forward into the haze and was gone. They assumed he'd moved to take cover, but when they reached the spot moments later, the grass was undisturbed, and there was no trace of footprints leading away. After the war, the mystery of Amos Carter faded from official records but lived on in local lore. Farmers plowing those same fields claimed to hear muffled footsteps pacing behind them when no one was there. Visitors reported seeing a lone soldier in a faded blue coat wandering aimlessly near Devil's Den, only to vanish when approached. Skeptics say it's all just campfire storytelling, the kind of ghost tale that grows in the fertile soil of tragedy. But there's a curious footnote in the archives. A letter from a Confederate veteran named Elijah Harrow, written in 1889, describing an encounter that has puzzled historians ever since. Harrow claimed that during the battle, he had been separated from his unit and stumbled across a Union soldier kneeling beside a rock. The man was muttering something Harrow couldn't quite hear, and when Harrow stepped closer, the soldier looked up with an expression of pure terror. Harrow described the man as having wide, searching eyes, as though he could see something behind me that I could not. Before Harrow could speak, the man bolted into the fog and disappeared. When Harrow later saw sketches of missing soldiers from the battle in a newspaper, he swore the man he'd seen was Amos Carter. This one account, buried in an obscure collection of veterans' memoirs, is what keeps the mystery alive for historians today. Was Carter suffering from battle shock, disoriented and fleeing from imagined threats? Did he desert under the haze of fear, slipping away into the countryside? Or was something else, something we can't explain, at work on that chaotic battlefield? The truth is, the Civil War was full of such unexplained vanishings. The chaos of combat, the vast, rugged landscapes, and the sheer scale of the fighting made it easy for men to simply disappear. But Carter's case stands out because of the weapon left behind, the lack of physical evidence, and the eerie consistency of the sightings that followed. Even now, when the fog settles thick over Gettysburg in the early morning, visitors sometimes report a strange stillness near the Devil's Denver. Some say they've seen a figure in Union blue just at the edge of vision, always standing, always watching, but never moving toward them. And if you listen closely, they say you might hear a faint voice, just one word drawn out in the mist: help. What happened to Amos Carter remains one of the battlefield's most enduring mysteries. In the next part of this story, we'll dig deeper into the strange reports, the forgotten search efforts, and the possibility that Carter's disappearance was not just a tragedy of war, but something far more unsettling. Why was this committee working in shadows? Why were its members ghosts, unwritten in records, absent from every ledger and muster roll? And why was William Donovan, a man history never acknowledged, allowed to stand in such a prominent place in that photograph, right beside the most powerful men of the Union, only to vanish into nothing? Kramer's eyes narrowed, his voice carrying the weight of someone who'd stared too long at a truth that didn't want to be known. Lincoln knew the war was ending. But peace, he paused, peace was a fragile animal. He didn't want politicians, he didn't want generals. He needed ghosts. That word hung in the room. Ghosts like Donovan. Invisible operators who could stand beside a president without leaving a trace behind. And it was then that the empty wooden chair in the photograph stopped being a quaint curiosity. It wasn't just a prop for the camera, it was a silent placeholder. A space kept open in case the moment came when someone had to step in, when the tide of history shifted, when the unthinkable threatened to happen. Claire felt the chill move across her skin. She realized that without her great-great-grandfather in that frame, the chair's meaning would have been lost forever. The first fracture in the mystery came not from the chair, but from Donovan's uniform. The patch on his lapel, small, precise, and almost unremarkable, hid something no one expected. Elsa, the forensic imaging expert, leaned in under the spectral scanner, her eyes locked on the screen. "There's something else here," she murmured. And then, under the tiny PC insignia, woven so faintly it almost merged with the fabric, were words, stitched in thread just a shade lighter than the wool. Elsa adjusted the filters until the letters came alive. 4 words. Target verified. Stand until April 14th. The room went dead silent. Claire's heart slammed in her chest. April 14th, 1865, the night Lincoln was shot. "Are you saying he knew?" she whispered. No one wanted to answer. But the message was unmistakable. It didn't sound like routine orders, it sounded like the language of a mission. Not patrol. Not ceremony. Assignment. Duration. A clock ticking down to the night a bullet would change history. The implications were suffocating. Donovan wasn't a bystander. He was placed there, possibly as a final line of defense. But if that was true, then why did he vanish from all records after that date? Why did his name never reappear? The possibilities twisted into darker shapes. Maybe he never got the order to act. Maybe he was taken out before he could. Maybe the same invisible hands that gave him the task decided he wouldn't live to complete it. Claire remembered the letter Donovan had left generations later. "If you ever find the photo with the chair, burn it." For years it made no sense. Now it was like a stone dropping into deep water. The photo wasn't just a memento, it was proof. Evidence that someone close to Lincoln knew something terrible was coming. And maybe, just maybe, failed to stop it. And yet, there was another layer. Elsa, still staring at the monitor, began analyzing the photograph itself, not just its subjects. From the moment it surfaced, they had all thought the same thing: It was too sharp, too vivid. Civil War photographs were never this clear. And they were certainly never in full color. Color photography wouldn't exist for another 3 decades. So how could this be? She ran pigment analysis, expecting to find hand tinting, a common 19th century trick to make black and white images look more lifelike. But the data shattered every assumption. These pigments weren't painted on after the fact. They were embedded into the emulsion when the image was first developed. Organic dyes, beetroot red, deep indigo, mixed with light reactive compounds no one in that era should have known how to use. The process was so delicate it would have been impossible to reproduce for public consumption. Which meant only one thing: this was an experiment. A prototype. But why would Lincoln commission something so advanced, so secret? That answer came from a forgotten journal entry written by Timothy O'Sullivan's assistant in 1866. The president requested one unique chromatic plate for his legacy image. There shall be no demonstration. A private development is advised. Kramer leaned back, his voice low. Lincoln wasn't a vain man. If he wanted an image in color, it wasn't for vanity, it was for meaning. He wanted something that could outlast the decay of history. Something meant to be understood not by his contemporaries but by people like us. That realization was a knife turning in Claire's mind. This photograph wasn't propaganda. It was a capsule, faces, details, and messages hidden in plain sight, waiting for someone far in the future to decode them. And Donovan? He wasn't just guarding Lincoln. He was guarding the photo. Carrying it. Protecting it. But then the question struck. If it was meant to be kept safe, why did Donovan's family have it? Why wasn't it locked away in some government vault? That answer came folded in the lining of the album itself. A single letter, sealed for more than a century. No stamp. No address. Just the words, to William. Inside, in ink that had faded but not died, was a voice Claire felt in her bones. You were chosen not to draw your sword but to stand visible among those who do. Whatever we do with peace will challenge us more than anything we did in war. Stand where they don't expect you. Watch who you need to. And if history gives you a miss, allow it to. Signed simply Al. It wasn't a nickname. It was Abraham Lincoln. And suddenly the entire picture, the empty chair, the strange disappearance, the warning stitched into a coat, snapped into focus. Lincoln himself had placed Donovan in that photograph, not to be remembered but to be forgotten. His purpose was to watch silently, act only if the moment came, and vanish from history if it didn't. Kramer's voice was almost reverent. This isn't a letter, it's a final directive. Which meant Donovan's erasure from the records wasn't negligence. It was deliberate. His existence was removed like a page torn from a book, leaving only the faint outline where the story used to be. And his warning to burn the photo? That was him still following orders, still guarding the truth Lincoln had entrusted to him alone. When news first leaked of the color Civil War photograph, historians were skeptical. When Donovan's name emerged, they were baffled. But when the message under his lapel and Lincoln's letter came to light, skepticism turned to unease. This wasn't rewriting history, it was unlocking a chapter no one wanted found. Claire refused every offer from networks and collectors. The photograph wasn't for profit. It was a promise kept through silence, across generations. Instead, she worked with the New York Historical Society to create an exhibit called The Man Who Stood Anyway. At its heart was an enlarged replica of the image, Lincoln's lined face, Grant's steady gaze, the empty chair, and Donovan, unremarkable to anyone who didn't know better. Visitors stopped. They stared. Some leaned in close to find the barely visible stitching in Donovan's coat. Others read Lincoln's letter twice as if the words might change on the second pass. Claire watched from the edges, unseen, just as Donovan once had. She didn't need them to call him a hero. She only needed them to see him. Because through it all, the stitched warning, the hidden assignment, the experimental photograph, Donovan had done exactly what Lincoln asked. He stood where no one expected him. He watched when no one thought to look. And he let history pass over him, erasing his name because that's what the job demanded. But time doesn't always forget. Sometimes, it hides things in plain sight, waiting for the right hands to lift the veil. One photograph. One missing man. And a message too dangerous for its own century. And here's where you have to ask yourself, what would you do if you found proof that history wasn't what we thought it was? Would you guard it like Donovan, letting the world stay in the dark? Or would you risk everything to show it? Because somewhere, maybe in another attic, another archive, another hidden fold in an old book, the rest of the truth might still be waiting. And when it surfaces, it might not just rewrite history, it might make you question how much of our past was ever real at all.